Hi, this is
the idea is to align with women and girls that are facing violence and put yourself in their shoes, kind of by, as the name suggests, being with them, standing with them and aligning with them. Because in the past, we have had the normal thing to do is that people keep quiet and they don't talk about cases of violence. But now we're encouraging people to come out and speak out and talk. And of course, when somebody talks about the issues, instead of making that person to be embarrassed about the situation they are in, you stand with that person and you stay with that person. So are we there with you when you come out and speak about violence against women and girls?
Yes, hello there. It's that evening when we get together to talk about gender-based violence. Today, I'm shifting the lens a little bit aside. That is not very comfortable for a lot of parents because we are the guilty ones in this area. When you talk about gender-based violence, what comes to your mind, what people think about often is sexual abuse. When you talk about physical abuse. And in fact, the World Health Organization says 70 million girls suffer physical abuse, which is when you use the whip, or in some cases, when you use words to abuse the kids. And I have two young people, as when you're compared to people like me, sitting, waiting, calling in from the United States of America, who are going to be speaking to the topic we are x-raying today. We've heard all kinds of gory stories of sexual abuse, especially rape against children and girls and women. But can you imagine that you may be guilty, if you are a parent, you may be guilty of abusing your own child, not sexually, but physically. And I have in the house with me two people, Blessing and Onyedikachi. Blessing Douglas is an author. And I would like to read the write-up that has been written to describe her. It makes it easier. I know Blessing, I know her from home, more or less. But she lives in Wheaton, Maryland currently. She spent most of her life in Nigeria, which is her home country, but she moved to the United States for graduate studies and career advancement. When she's not journaling her experiences, you might find Blessing volunteering at refugee camps, participating in mental health advocacy, which is one of her passions, or hosting leadership workshops for youths in her local community. During her years of volunteering in college, Blessing Douglas found herself increasingly obsessed with stories of people in the communities she served, stories of domestic violence, child abuse, and mental illness, coupled with some of her personal experience, which is all that inspired her to work on the novel that was swimming around in her head. That's the way she describes it. But I mean, it's nice to have you here, Blessing. And that novel is the inspiration for the title of our program today. I mean, it's strange. I'm sure you're surprised to see we see of love and bruises. And I'll explain after I've introduced Onyedikachi, right? Though Blessings, her hope is that the novel will provoke conversations about discipline and abuse, where parents and caregivers cross the line. The psychological long-term effect on children's mental health as they grow into adulthood. The person who's going to be speaking with her is a first-class graduate of psychology from here in Nigeria, but he's the founder of the Partum Support Network Africa, a leading maternal mental health organization. He has 2 degrees in psychology, actually, and he has over 7 years of experience as a therapist with a focus on mood and anxiety disorders. Kachi also earned his PhD in leadership communication in Kansas State University. When Kachi, full name Onyedikachi, isn't working to improve access to mental health care, he works to help social change leaders in Africa develop the capacity to progress on tough challenges facing the continent. What a combination. You know what? I'd like to start with, well, why did I put it together? Kachi is mental health. You know, I find it ridiculous that the same mothers who cry and want a baby, every African parent that I know wants to be a parent. And then when we become parents, we do the things that make us look like people. Blessing. What do you say to that? Let's start with you. But
Okay.
you first say hello to those who are watching us.
Hello, everyone watching. Thank you for taking time to join us this evening. And before I go into details of the conversation, I would like to first of all state that this is not a judgment or a condemnation on any parent or caregiver. Rather, I would like us to see it as an orientation. We have to acknowledge that there are intergenerational um, cycle of abuse, and parents who endure or may have survived and endured abuse oftentimes tend to recycle that culture, and those are the ones that tend to abuse their own children.
Wow. Okay, so tell me why abuse is important. I mean, focusing on this. Tell me about of Love and Bruises. I read that book and I will tell you I cringed in most places. I don't even know if you exaggerated a little bit. Did you?
um I don't know. I think I just put my feelings got the best of me in writing. So I wouldn't call it an exaggeration. I would say it's how I felt.
So tell me about, where do parents draw the line? You describe a parent, this is a story of a young girl. I need to explain to people, it's a young girl who was born out of wedlock. She
Mm-hmm.
ended up with her father, thinking her father would love her, but her
Mm-hmm.
father loved her with the whip. I mean, I don't know what you call it, hard love.
Yeah. So basically, I would say that there are various factors that are working together that result in child abuse, and it's not just in Africa. It happens across religions, cultures, continents, and all of that. And some of the stressors that contribute to these factors could be poverty, like economic stress. It could be job discrimination. It could be overcrowding, living environment, marital status, life happens kind of situations. And so when you find yourself as a young man, probably in college, having a career ahead of you, you're not ready for a child, you're not ready for a family, and something happens and you have a child out of wedlock, you nurse a level of resentment towards that child. And it's almost like the child is here to ruin your life or your career or your purpose and just put you off track. And so that resentment is already there. And so if the child does something wrong and you intend to discipline that child, you're not disciplining the child from the you're not disciplining the child from out of love or from the right spot. Let me put it that way. You're disciplining that child out of anger, sometimes transferred aggression, and all of these things come into play. And so you tend to lose focus of why you're actually disciplining that child. He, that child may not even understand why you're so angry or the level of violence you're inflicting and why that violence is there. And so at the end of the day, you don't even achieve the purpose of why you're trying to discipline that child, and you're just doing it out of anger, and you injure the child.
Okay, tell me, I would like the psychologist to come in at this point. And for that, I would like Onyedikachi. Can you define for me what is there a thin line between abuse and love when we are raising our kids? And I say this with all sense of responsibility. And I wonder if it's not a form of mental problem, what the way we take the whip to our children.
Did you say, if I heard your question correctly, the difference between abuse and love, or
That's right. Yes. There's a thin line between abuse and love because you love your child so much, you don't want the child to go. Let me give an example. I have been in a situation where I got home, I lived in an environment where we paid for water, right? I got home and my son, we had been at church all day for like 5-6 hours before we got back home. He had left the tap on and then we pay for water. The first thing that went to my head was that, my goodness, my bill is going to be crazy this month. And I took the whip and I attacked him. With that whip. And when I hit him, I couldn't stop. It took my husband to call me to my senses and say, it was like I was mad. Do we go crazy I'm just thinking.
yeah. So what you just described is what we typically call emotional hijacking. When you say like you did not know, you could not stop yourself, it's like that emotional brain, the mid part of our brain, just takes charge of the entire brain. So we're not thinking rationally about the situation. We're not evaluating the situation rationally. Because when you calm down after you've taken out that rage, you'd be like, oh, I shouldn't have hit him that much. It's just water, or it's just money. You know, if I had, you know, probably if the whip touched his eyes and he got blind, you know, it's not rational, the amount of violence, you know, that we level against the kid when we think rationally about the, you know, the mistakes that they have made. So I think that happens a lot of times, and I think that's when I was thinking about this session, the fact that many of us Africans, and not only Africans, parents, we're not very emotionally intelligent, yeah, and so we do not know how to regulate our behavior to match the events happening. So being able to restrain yourself in the face of frustration, you know, because the events you just described is very frustrating. You pay for the water, you know, the child should know better, and it's okay to feel frustrated. But then, what do you do with the emotion, and how do you address the situation? It's something we do not consciously think about. And again, because there's very few consequence, you know, there's no consequence when parents abuse or assault their kids in Nigeria. So if you are living in other countries where there's more consequences for this, it regulates the behavior to an extent, yeah. But there's no regulation, you know. There's nothing regulates the behavior, so it's free reign. That's why things like that happen. And like you said, it doesn't take away the fact that the mom still loves the child. You still love your son. Okay, it's just a moment of weakness, and like, you know, Blessing has just described, it's patterns, yeah. It's the way our brains have been wired to react in this situation. It's what you probably experience yourself. It's what you've come to it's what your child has also come to expect. Okay, and so we're just in that cycle where with interventions like this, we will be able to break free.
No, I mean, I'll come back to Blessing now, because I want to be able to go check a little bit of Blessing's work when we come back, because you find yourself working in the area of mental health. You are so interested in helping the refugees and all of that. What was it? Because like you said in that book, it was a little bit about yourself too. But this book kept swimming in your head. Can you paint the picture of what you see when you, because for example, UNICEF says that almost 1/4 of girls aged between 15 and 19, and this is a worldwide thing, you know, have suffered some form of physical violence since age 15. And in some ways, I find it is also kind of connected to this whole idea of sex. It's like you have a daughter, you want her to be pure, and then you make sure that you gain the hell out of her so that she doesn't misbehave. I mean, I don't understand. I want you to address that question.
Okay, like Onyedikachi said, it's not done from a place it's done from a place of love, and also, but then again, there's the inability to manage your emotions when you're doing it. So in my own case, I wouldn't say, a lot of people would say that my dad loves me to death. They would say that all the time. Like, but he would never say
your dad. That's your dad.
Yes. But he would never say it to my face. He would never tell me he loves me. It's only maybe, let me say, recently, probably after my wedding, that he started saying it. But then, for instance, when the house help is talking to me, like, man, if you hear what daddy was telling his friends about you. But when I'm there, he will never say it to my face. So I think most of it was part of the fact that they've had their own personal experiences. They have this picture of what they want their children to look like. They don't want them to derail from that picture that they have in their mind. So the moment that child is misbehaving or doing something that is out of, the picture that they've envisioned in their minds, they want to do everything possible to put that child on track. And most times the approach that they use, they don't think it will be counterproductive. They just feel this is the best way they need to do it, and this is what was done to them. And so they're replicating what was done to them in the hopes that the child would stay put and focus and do what they want. And sometimes the children turn out right, which probably may be as a result of what they did or may not. There's no scientific research that has proven that years and years of abuse ensured that this child came out to be this way. It also can be as a result of the other relationships that these children keep, their connection, network, people that they've met that have helped them to evolve in different directions, and the counsel that they are getting, which sometimes doesn't have anything to do with the parents. But then again, everybody likes to identify with success. And so when these children grow up and they're successful, it's like, everything I did worked. She turned out right. But if not, it's like I did my best, and maybe my best was not good enough. That's why she didn't turn out right. I don't know if that answered the question. So
No,
yeah,
it does to a certain extent. What I was saying is because I would need to look. I mean, I don't know if the technical is ready, and
Okay.
every parent wants what's best for their child.
yes,
And most times, I don't know what you think, how you think religion plays a part in that. Onyedikachi, do you want to address that issue? Where very readily we quote the question of spare the rod and spoil the child,
Yeah. I like to push back on that a bit because I think it's more of a cultural thing than it is a religious thing. I think that culturally, across all cultures, across all religions, in Nigeria, outside Nigeria, you see parents spanking their kids, and many of them have subscribed to these Abrahamic religions of Christianity or Islam, so they might not even have that framework to work with. But I think the point is people do or use the tools that they have. And so they cannot use a tool that they do not have. If spanking is the only tool for discipline that you have, then you cannot, there's no way you do anything other than use the tools that you have. And this is what I find with a lot of new parents now, especially parents who are raising kids, like Nigerian parents raising kids outside Nigeria. It's very frustrating because now they cannot spank the child. Like, so what do I do? Like, what am I to do with this child? They have no tools, in their arsenal to help shape the child's life other than spanking, which is what they were used to. And if that's the only thing, like I said, you're used to, you do it. So I think the conversation we need to have is what else can parents do, to discipline their child? What other tools, should they be exposed to that can help them mold and shape the child? Because I think that when they do not have those tools, they just fall back to the default, which is, spanking and hitting.
Okay.
The norm where we're from culturally.
Well, it's a good thing that you guys are in societies where it's different, and especially blessing. You have a little girl now, right? Yeah. You have a little daughter. How old is she now?
She's 2 years old, and this is what they call the terrible two, and she's tested a lot of boundaries.
So have you felt the urge to take a whip to her? Because you see, I asked this because Kachi has just said something that is fundamental. They use the tools that they have. And you find parents who are raising kids abroad are frustrated. I say, these children are going to be spoiled and I'll ask him to address the balance when we come back. But before I go on a break to see your work, I'm asking, frankly, as a parent, have you felt tempted to whoop that child?
I haven't just felt tempted. I think once or twice I have spanked her and I've been like, and then after a while, I call her and I'd be like, do you know why Mama did that? She'll be looking at me. I'm like, this is what you did. This is why you shouldn't do this. And henceforth, this is what is going to happen. And so I got to that point where I start depriving her of stuff. So I know she loves her tablet so much. And if she tries to test my boundaries, as she would usually do, I'll be like, okay, if you don't do this, you don't get your tablet and you don't have screen time today. Or I'll be like, you're going to naughty corner. She has a naughty corner in the house. She does not like. And so now she begins to understand that there are consequences for her actions. And so when I tell her that there will be no screen time today, she stays, she comports herself. Or if I say she's going to naughty corner, and sometimes she does go to naughty corner because she will still misbehave.
At age 2, that's interesting. We're already teaching her the way to go. So,
yes.
But now I want to see some of your work, if Jennifer is ready, and see the journey to writing the book. The book is a very short one, considering the fact that when I picked up that book, I didn't drop it. I had to finish it. That's the truth. And because it was so graphic, and I want you to describe some of those things for me. But first, let me see the work you're doing right now. And if Jennifer is ready, can we just please see what Blessing is doing? And again, we're talking about physical abuse of children by parents. We're not judging them, like Blessing says. Yes, I always ask that they play pictures of the work that you do so that they know that whoever I'm interviewing, this is the background they're coming from. Now, all those pictures is you going out for outreaches,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes.
Outreaches where?
We started in Yola. So we've been around, we've done stuff in Yola, we've done things in Abuja, we've done things in Lagos, Ibadan, Ghana, and in the US,
Saying
Maryland.
what? Saying what to people?
So it's mental health advocacy, mental health awareness. We've had group counseling with children, and we always have like a professional psychologist on our team. We had phone lines that people would call in and report and everything. But then again, most kids are scared to speak about what they are going through because they rely a lot on their parents. We don't have a child care or foster care system here where you would say if the child is being abused, you can take the child away from the abusive environment and put them in the foster care system where the government takes care of them. We don't have that back home, and so the child will be scared to say anything because they know they depend on the family or the abuser for food, shelter, and clothing, and sometimes education. And so speaking up is not there. Instead, they are forced to stay in the situation. So what we were doing, because we know that we do not have the available foster care system, we're trying to teach them coping mechanisms. You're in this situation, but this is how you can cope in the situation. That's what we're doing.
So what were some of the worst stories that you heard? One of the worst I read in your book, in the home of this family, a cousin or so, or a foster child comes into the house, but she's a more mature girl, and the father doesn't only whop with cow hide, but he also actually puts pepper in the girl's vagina.
Yeah.
Because he thought that maybe that would stop her. I don't know. What did the girl do?
Well, there are different things people think they can use to curtail promiscuity. And I guess for that situation, the father thought, since those were, and then another thing is the idea of, inflicting pain on the area or the part of the body that was used to commit the crime. For instance, let me just make a reference to Chimamanda's book, Pop Hibiscus, where the father wants the feet of the son for going somewhere or doing something to the girl's hand for doing some, So for this case, the girl had sexual intercourse with somebody, and so the way to punish her was to put sprinkled pepper that was mixed with water, of course, to make pepper spray, and put it in her genitalia and put it all over her body, tie her, and whip her severely, in the hopes that the next time she thinks about engaging in any form of sexual activity, she would remember that incident and not do it again, I guess.
Did they stop her? Because that's the thing.
No, it made her worse. She became like, she's like, okay, so this is what you want to do. No problem. Go on, do it. I'm used to it. So some of these things are counterproductive.
which is the point at which Onyedikachi should come in. You're the psychologist here. Even though, do parents really know if it is counterproductive, or if they know, would that stop them? Would that really stop them? And because I was looking at a video recently, this was a foster father that actually whipped a child and then used iron to burn holes in the child's body. It's like, is it that we are crazy when those things happen? Or do we have a line that we get to and I don't know.
Yeah, again, it's our inability to control rage and anger. It's shocking, and people like to say, "Oh, we turned out right. We went through the same things too, and we turned out okay." You just need to look at the country Nigeria and then ask yourself, like, did anyone turn out okay, really? The society is a function of the human beings in it, and when you look at the human beings in it, we're all carrying trauma, all being abused, and so the system is bastardized and abused because the people who are trying to shape it, haven't processed their own trauma and even living every day in trauma. So, I think one of the things people need to understand is it doesn't help. It doesn't help. Some people argue like, oh, it helps to build resilience. There are other ways to build resilience besides a child. Okay, so like it's completely irrational that somebody would take an iron and burn their own child in hopes that it somehow instills a lesson in the child. You know, it's mental illness. It's trauma response, and that nobody's talking about it again because I say there's no regulation. Yeah, there are no consequences for these actions. But like,
But is it really fair though? I mean, to interfere in how a parent is raising their child?
so if again
Blessing is nodding. Yes, yes, yes.
the
I mean,
American system is not perfect. Yeah, the foster care system is a mess. Yeah, but there's value in removing a child from an abusive environment. Okay, so the problem is that we have a lot of things plaguing the country that nobody's even paying attention to things like this. Yeah, so people don't. But it is completely okay to pull a child away from an abusive from abusive environment. There was one recently in the news where this woman thought the niece was, you know, a witch, and so she set the child on fire. It's like I could not eat after I saw the video. It's like this is a rational human being sitting down and saying this child, 5, 7 years old, is a witch, and this is how we cure the witchcraft. It's crazy. So I think that's the problem, and I think it's completely okay if somebody has spotted the minor abuses that the child had experienced with that auntie and pulled the child away. The child would not have been set ablaze because it's like babies. You know, it's progressive. You do one, the child develops some resilience against that abuse. You want to,
then you go higher.
yeah. It's like, you know, just to see that the child is inflicted with pain, and so the goal of correcting the child is lost. And the thing now is for you to satisfy your urge to inflict pain just for the sake of it, which is the conversation that most parents are not ready to have. You know, when parents actually use those forms of discipline, what they are doing is taking it's therapeutic for the parents. It's taking out their own anger and pain with something else. It's displacement in psychology. The things that are affecting the parents, they have no power to control. Yeah. And so they displace all of that pent up anger, something that knows that they know would not fight back. Yeah. And that's actually what happens in many families. It's not really the water that made you snap. It's the fact that there's no money and we're wasting money. And so you take out the pain of the crowd. You know, it's the societal factors that we cannot handle. And so we need an outlet for it. And if everyone is aware of how these things play on our minds, then we'll do better.
Yeah.
But tell me, Blessing, you know, as you were writing that book, right? I mean, I could say, yeah, don't worry, she's not abroad, she did. She's not abroad, doesn't consign her, you know, she's talking like Oyinbo. That is not our culture. You know, do you think, on hindsight, I mean, you came out all right because you say you were the product of love, right? That turned sour, and your father was the one that raised you. So you have a similar experience of being raised without a mommy figure, I mean, a real mommy in you, but you turned out right. So why should we say that this is wrong after all?
So that's what I was talking about. That first of all, you have to think about the relationships, the environment, and the people that the child was around. You know, so I didn't turn out right because those things were done to me, or as a matter of fact, I was actually diagnosed with depression and bipolar disorder. I was on antidepressants, carbamazepine, risperidone, and at some point, I think fluoxetine for years.
Did you hate your father?
Huh?
Your father, did you hate your father for using the whip on you growing up?
Yes, I did. I detested him a lot. There was a time we weren't talking for over 2 years. And so, but then, like I said, I met people who, like, you know, kind of helped me reshape my life, helped me to see things from his perspective and also see things from a different perspective, helped me to heal. I was on therapy, of course, helped me to, you know, evolve and grow beyond all of that pain and all of that trauma. And, you know, that was one of the things that inspired me to start helping other people. And these people, I met them when I went to college. I went to an American school that, you know, was modeled after the American system. And so you have access to therapy, you have access to a psychologist, you have access to world-class physicians, you have access to people who are not just there to help you because they want to exploit you, but they are there to help you because they are genuinely they genuinely care about you, which is something that I was not familiar with. Anybody that I met prior to when I went to college would want to help you because they want to exploit you. I met somebody who was my father's own friend and was telling me, how much do you get for pocket money? If you be my girlfriend, I'll be giving you this amount of money. So it's almost like a disease, a virus, like scratch my back, I scratch your back kind of mentality. Nobody was actually there to like give me a shoulder to cry on or hold me and hug me and tell me, okay, this is how we're going to get through this, until I went to college. And so those were the formative parts of my life for me in college, and the people I met. And all of those people came together to help me in such a way that my story was different. And so I have a story that a lot of people can be proud of, but nobody really knows, what I went through or the people that actually helped me through it. Yeah.
So tell me so the book now is because you're trying to get parents to realize what?
I'm trying to get parents to understand that this cycle of violence, this culture of violence that they, disguise as discipline, it's terribly wrong. We have to start talking about it, and like Onyedikachi said, finding better ways to manage our emotions as individuals. Because first of all, realizing what you're doing is wrong is one thing, and it's only when you realize what you're doing is wrong that's the point where you will sort out solutions to do better. But if you don't think what you're doing is wrong and you just keep jumping up and down the place and shouting, "You turned out right," or "Our parents did it to us, we turned out right," everybody will be all right last. That kind of attitude will not change anything. So first of all, I need parents to understand that this problem exists. It is only when you understand that the problem exists that you accept that you need to find a solution. If you don't accept that the problem exists, you will not try to find a solution. So that's where I want people to come up, have this conversation, start doing better.
So I wonder, for Mr. Onyedikachi, this problem is the type that therapy should solve. Do you see a situation where in this country we begin to accept therapy as a way out? Because of course, first of all, how I raise my child is not your business.
Yeah, certainly. I think that soon, and it's already happening. People are beginning to warm up to psychological interventions. Heartwarming to hear Blessing say she saw a therapist got help. And more people are definitely reaching out for help. And it's a huge change from when I started the work. I remember when I was going to study psychology, my parents thought I was crazy. What would you do with this degree? There's no use for it. And it's because in Nigeria, there's no value for mental health. A meager 3% of our health budget, 3% of the health budget that's already small, goes to mental health. There's only 200 clinical psychologists in the entire country, 200 million people. So when you think about it, even though there's an increase in awareness and people are trying to reach out, there's no access to mental health care because there's just a shortage of practitioners and a lack of funding for mental health care. So, I do have hope that the more awareness we continue to create, the more, maybe the government will be invested in mental health care. But as today, over 40% of Nigerians struggle with a mental health condition. 40%. So if you do that math, we're talking about 60 million people. And nobody's having a conversation about it. There's fire on the mountain and no one is.
And no one is going. So let me see some of your work. Now let me see some of your work, because you started as postpartum. And postpartum is another area people don't even realize, that the woman has a baby and then you don't understand why she suddenly hates the baby or wants to drop the baby or drown the baby. And especially in a place like Nigeria, we say, pikin na joy. Waiting, this woman na witch. This woman na witch. So let me see some of the pictures from Onyedikachi's work from the Postpartum Network. I don't know if they're ready. If not, while they are getting ready, see, okay, that was good. You were educating mothers to be in those pictures?
Yes, so the work typically revolves around visiting antenatal clinics to educate and screen moms who are pregnant. So during pregnancy, they get educated about postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, what you just described, postpartum psychosis, which seems to
Oh, so there's a difference. I'm sorry.
yeah. So yeah, I mean it's more severe, and then we screen them so that we get a sense of how they're feeling, and then we reach out to them and provide support till they deliver the baby and even after they deliver. But we also visit postnatal clinics to educate mothers who've just had their babies and screen them too, because it's important to screen during pregnancy and screen after pregnancy too, because sometimes the depression would not show during pregnancy, it will show after. Or the anxiety would not show up during pregnancy, it will show up after. So that's the work we typically do: screen, educate, and then provide access to mental health care for them.
What kind of difference would you say your work? Do you feel frustrated, when you look at it and say, okay, how many women can you reach? I'm sure you get things like, whenever I chop, now postpartum depression, now they talk. We haven't eaten, and you're talking about depression.
Yeah, so I mean, we get that sometimes, but mostly we get two of them at the same time. Mother's saying like, "Oh, I'm depressed," but also, "Can you help me because I don't have money to eat?" It's like, and it's hard because, like you said, how many can we support? We had a conversation actually yesterday about this, where we say, "Hey, we need to hold to purpose. We cannot continue to give money to moms. We need to say, hey, we are unfortunately unable to provide you financial support." It's like gold and silver we do not have. What we have would give. We'll provide you mental health care, and hopefully you'll be able to not, when you're mentally healthy, be able to provide for yourself and be self-sufficient. But that's the frustration. There's not a lot of support for the work we're doing. Um, there's no funding for the work we're doing. It's just hard to sustain. There's so many women to be reached. But the joy is in seeing moms getting the help, even if it's one, two, three, four. In the past 2 years, we've reached 300 moms directly. So it's been able to. We feel like it's moving the needle gradually. If at all, it's allowing moms have a conversation about this openly and publicly, and that's
It's one step.
yeah.
It's one step. And well, I mean, I don't disregard little beginnings. If you want to think about frustration of looking at the big work, can be terrible. But when I hear things like, bless you, to address this, when I hear things like what Onyedikachi has just said, only 200 clinical psychologists in this country, yet 40% of Nigerians suffer from mental health issues. It means that the children are in trouble. Oh. They are still abusing children. That's what it means, isn't it?
Yes, it's happening. And the funny thing is that we don't see the intercorrelation, because there's an intercorrelation between this physical abuse and sexual abuse. And there's an intercorrelation between this physical abuse and domestic violence. When a young man has gone through severe abuse throughout his childhood and is traumatized and grows up, when he's dating somebody and the person, at the slightest provocation, it's not to talk about it, it's to impose yourself on the person and try to get the person to see your rage. And then at the end of the day, you say, you made me do it. You made me do it. And so you too, you feel guilty because the person is telling you, this is what you did that made me do it. And you go back and you're saying, I'm sorry. Because you probably have also endured abuse and you had a childhood where physical violence was what was used as correction. And so you say, he's correcting me from a place of love. And you stay in domestic violence. Or if you talk about sexual violence, you're seeing people who are being physically abused and then sexually abused, and they're being told, if you say anything, I'm going to kill you. Because that person physically abused you, you're scared that if you say something, he has the capacity to kill you. And so you keep quiet.
Wow, that's an interesting correlation. What do you think about that? I mean, because I just wonder though that all the increase and the high level of sexual violence meted against women could be traced to the trauma of their race, their upbringing. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Onyedikachi, do you agree with that?
At the risk of exonerating people for their actions, I think that it's important that we be careful, because people will then justify the actions, hurting, raping. Oh, it's not my fault. It takes away agency from them. But it is true. It plays a role. It's a system. Yeah, everything is connected. So if you grow up in an abusive home where violence is the only way to handle disputes or disagreements, then you would use violence. And violence in different forms: verbal violence, physical violence, sexual assault. And it's because we've been raised in a culture of violence. We don't see it when we're in it. You need to step away from the country for a bit to see that this is not okay. Like, why is everybody so aggressive and violent? But it's the culture we've been raised in, and so it's not surprising that these men grow up to be these monsters, and and it's just heartbreaking to watch, because I think that we could do better. Families could do better. I was spanked growing up as a child. I would not say I was not spanked. My mom whooped me, and
Do you have kids now?
No, I don't.
Yet.
Yeah, I guess yes.
Or you don't plan to? You say none of this for me because it's too heartbreaking.
No, I think the world is a scary place right now. Anyone who wants to bring a child into the world has to be ready, mentally, financially, psychologically, to raise the child, because it's really scary to bring a child into this world. But I mean, I'm open to it. I'm not saying because I'm live on TV, someone's going to like, Kachi said he's not going to have a child. What I'm saying. Like, I'm just saying it's something I'm deliberating fully upon before making that decision, because it's really difficult.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That's a good place for Blessing to come in. Is it that most people are just having kids, they're not thinking about it, and so they can't deal with it? I mean, for example, the story in that book, the two stories you gave, one, the girl grew up without her mother, which I suspect is you. Was that you? And then the other one was a girl who her father ran away and the mother was helpless, apparently, and sent the mother to a cousin to raise. Do you get? So it's like we are accidental parents, or what is it?
Yeah, so it's almost like some of us are not we are not ready for some of the responsibilities that come with the actions that we take. So my friend used to make the statement, which is, don't play adult games if you're not ready for adult responsibilities. So you find yourself in that situation where you're not thinking about the consequences of some of your actions, and then you have kids and you're not ready. And so you pass them on to somebody else to take care of. And of course, grandparents are very loving and very calm, and they're like, oh, bring them, I'll take care of them. But that's not their job. And so these kids are being raised by other people. They're exposed to a lot of other biases in the environment that you have no idea of. And you've just basically given your responsibility to somebody else. And if you're being forced to take up responsibility, that's another battle, because it's almost like that is a constant reminder of what you didn't want.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now I want us to address the question of, so what is the right way? Because again, why is it that when it comes to abuse or violence, the girl child is the one that suffers the most? And I want both of you to address it. Let's go off with Blessing first. Why is it the girl? Okay, no, let's start with it. Let's start with the guy who's on the show. Why is that? Is a girl child that is usually the victim, or the one that is abused more?
So, because there are layers to this again, I like to think about things from like a systemic. I like to take a systemic approach to things. So, firstly, we live in a very patriarchal society. Yeah. So, the boys are socialized to feel like the pain they get could be channeled and be used to drive them to success. Yeah. So, man up. It toughens you up. It makes you stronger. So there's this positive spin to the abuse we receive. Even when boys get sexually abused, we put a positive spin to it. Like, hey, get excited about it. Like, oh my God, if an older woman did that to you, you're mature, you're grown now. There's a positive spin to everything negative that happens to a boy child. With a woman, though, there's always a negative spin to it. And I mean, it's already a negative event. It's more negative. She's stigmatized. She's ridiculed. If I go outside and say I have sexual intercourse and my father finds out, my father is not going to spank me for. I've not seen a father who spanks his son for having sex. Like, oh, you need to be careful. Don't be doing this. They would raise their voice, but everybody's going to come put pepper in my genitals. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. It's like it's a system in how we view women. The system is invested in putting women down, suppressing them. That's the system. So that shows up in how women process and it's not their fault really, and make sense of the whole experience. Yeah, so it has a whole negative impact on women because of how society already treats women. That's what I can say to that. It's not that boys are not negatively impacted. You know, nobody should be going around sexually assaulting women. Okay, and then nobody is okay. No man is okay if he's sexually abusive, physically abusive. It's not okay. It's just that he gets away with it in society because the society is patriarchal, not because he is okay. He's not a well-rounded individual at all. So both sexes, both genders get impacted. Women have the worst deal because patriarchy, but boys too are impacted.
Could it be a function of women being softer? I mean, I don't know. Bless, what do you think? Because I mean, you have a case in that book. I'm sorry, I keep talking about the book because it was so. People should go. Where is the book available, by the way?
It's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Nobles, and currently there's an advert on my Instagram page telling people how they can pre-order, so I can send copies to Nigeria. There's a bookshop I'm partnering with where people can pre-order and pick it up.
Okay, because I mean, for example, there's a story there of the young man was also abused, but it was like he kind of like manned up or toughened up, say "Kata kata, they go kill me" or something like that.
Yes. And if you remember, he was also the one that got missing because it got to a point where he couldn't take it anymore. So he probably ran away. There are two factors. The readers will probably have to figure it out. So either he ran away, probably ran away, or in the process of being abused, he got killed, and the story was still.
It disappeared.
And it disappeared. So nobody knows if he really ran away or if they killed him, and nobody knows. But
well, I mean, what would you say to somebody who tells you that level of violence is impossible? How can a father whip the child to the point that blood is dripping, and then he puts pepper on top of that blood? That father likes pepper.
Well, like he said, when you don't have control of your emotions, sometimes you're doing this thing not from the place of love, that you should actually do it and evaluate what you want to achieve by trying to discipline that child, but you're transferring aggressions as well from probably previous things that the child may have done, or from your own. You're probably thinking of all the frustrations in your life and thinking, this child is making me do this. If you didn't do this, I won't have done this to you, And so it happens all over and all over again. Hello?
I'm just frozen. So yeah, Blessing, say more about your book. Like, how did what's the writing process like, and what impact are you seeing this book already making, so far?
Okay. Basically, the writing process was me journaling most of the things I was seeing around me growing up, and also in my work, the stories that I was hearing, I was journaling most of it, and some of my own personal experience, I was also journaling them. And I got to the point where this issue was becoming more and more glaring on social media. Every other day, Instablog is posting something. Like you mentioned, the lady that set the child on fire. I've seen even in school, it's been like perpetrated in school. Teachers, brutalizing kids for not doing an assignment. It's ridiculous and barbaric. And so I'm like, this is the time, to talk about it.
This is time for the book. This is time for the book. So I would like to. I'm not sure if you guys can hear me because I popped up for a little bit.
Yes.
Am I good to go? Great. So I'd like to hear from Onyedikachi because we say it's parents not being able to control themselves. How do we get parents to understand that at the end of the day, we all are losers if we don't control ourselves with the kind of abuse we meet out on our children, especially the girls? That's my focus for today.
So I think that stories are powerful. I think stories are powerful, and as Africans, Nigerians, we love stories a lot. I think that we need to continue to tell stories of how um, this violence negatively impacts the kids. We need to books like what I mean that Blessing has written will be powerful to get them to change their orientation towards discipline. But we also need to start educating parents on better strategies for discipline. The challenge, though, is you cannot teach an old dog a new trick. It's just very difficult. So, except they get like a coach, somebody to work with them personally. And how realistic, how feasible is it? How many people can afford to get a coach to work with you or go into therapy to work on their own traumas? That's the bigger challenge, the lack of access to mental health care. Because I think most parents need mental health care. We all do. To help them just walk through their own trauma, walk through some of their reactions, and then better handle the situations that they find themselves in when they work with their kids. That's the work that needs to be done. But it's
whose work is it? Ours, yours, government, individual?
Again, it's the work of individuals to do the work for themselves. So reach out if you find that you have problems managing your temper. I know that I had to make a decision myself. My mom is like, she's probably going to watch this and cuss me out, but my mom is tempered, and my dad is like very emotionally intelligent, has it all together. He's the kind of guy to wake you up at 2 a.m. in the morning to sleep with you. My mom is going to whoop you ASAP. And I had to make a decision like, hey, children will take the temperament of their moms by default. That's what psychology says, yeah? So temperament and intelligence is gotten from mothers. That's naturally. So I had to sit down and make a decision and say, hey, I don't want to be short-tempered. Like, what do I need to do? And so I started to do that work myself to better regulate my emotions. And I think that's the work that everybody needs to do, to sit down and say, how do I better regulate my emotions? What resources are out there? Google is your friend now. You can learn simple techniques to manage your emotions, take deep breaths, regulate yourself better. So I think that's the work that everybody needs to do. Because if we do wait for the government to step in, nothing is going to happen, sadly.
Okay, my aim is to end gender-based violence, and today I've been speaking to the issue of sparing the rod, and I'm hoping parents will spare the rod. But before that, let me just take a short break and take some of the pledges that I always run every week, where we pledge to be there for our children. So if tech is ready, can I quickly get that pledge out to remind parents that they need to be on the alert for their children, especially their daughters, all the time?
I pledge to learn about types, signs, and prevention of violence against children. I pledge to speak out and report all cases of violence against children to the appropriate authorities. I pledge to step in and help any child experiencing violence. I pledge to consciously create an environment free from violence for my child. I pledge to communicate effectively and spend quality time with my children and build a trustworthy relationship with them. So, help me God.
State of the children, yes, and they agree, yes. But you see that case about report cases against violence against my children. What if I'm the one that's being violent to my child? Who will report the case? Yeah? This is why, as we round up our last few minutes, I want Blessing to address this question. This is something about everybody. Everybody. Okay, we're typing out the sexual assault helplines because that's still the biggest crime that exists against young girls and women. However, Onyedikachi says something, literally always needs some access to mental care. So if we have that problem, he says Google is there, even if we have only 200 clinical psychologists. But if we say, most times, I'm going to say this in pidgin, na me born you, na me give you life, so that I fit take that life. You know how parents have this proprietary air, I gave you life. and I can end it if I so want. How do we get parents to understand that? The life that they brought is not really theirs.
I think everybody has to start holding these parents accountable. Everybody has a role to play. Like in the US, when you have a child, the first thing you know is that that child is not yours. The government owns the child before you. If you misbehave, they take the child away from you. So when they know that, behind their minds, they have to be careful how they work with these children. Like when I take my child to the hospital, they're not just doing a proper medical evaluation. They're checking every part of her body to make sure she's not being abused. And if they notice anything, they won't tell you. They'll write a report. The next thing you know is that child welfare services is at your door and you have to explain. So if we now incorporate some of these values, these things into our value system, and you have like private school, because I'm sure the public schools won't do it. If private schools start, our PTA shouldn't be about discussing school fees increase and discussing school uniforms and all of that. Our PTA should also have segments that includes mental health evaluations about some of these kids that are coming from troubled homes and how to manage the situations. Our PTA should be orienting these parents as well about how to get help. And if they don't know where to get help, part of the PTA meeting segment should provide a psychologist that would have workshops to encourage them and talk to them about how to deal with these issues, both at home and in school. You shouldn't have cases of schools where teachers are brutalizing kids because they didn't do assignment. That's wrong. So every school should have a psychologist. Every school should have a psychologist.
So we should be pushing
it upon themselves to also, you're taking school fees from these parents. It should also be your responsibility to make sure that these kids are well to do, both in your school environment and at home.
So this is where I would like also Onyedikachi to round up. But I wanted to round up on this point. Don't we have bigger problems than all this question of psychology and mental health? Don't we have bigger problems of hunger? What would you say to somebody who says that to you?
I mean, there's no bigger problem than the mental health challenges we're facing currently, because every other thing rests on it. We're trusting individuals who are traumatized and cannot manage their emotions to run the country and provide us opportunities. It's not possible. I mean, just look at the leaders that we have. It's impossible. I feel like they need mental health care. Okay, I feel like you look at some of the conversations we have in the public sphere, in this public spaces, and you wonder like, how can a rational human being have this kind of conversation? And that's the problem, because there's no mental health care. Okay, so we have that. There's no bigger problem right now. And my own call, finally will be like, the government needs to start investing in mental health care. There needs to be significant action. Parents need to start encouraging their kids to study psychology. All this we need therapists in the school. Who's going to be the therapist in the schools? Like, no, therapists don't finish. I mean, I'm not joking. Like, we don't have any therapists. I'm on the board for 2 mental health organizations. We're struggling to find therapists anywhere to volunteer or to even work. There's no therapist anywhere. So we need more young people to go into that space. And I mean, young people are becoming more aware, getting more enlightened. So
they should learn.
Space going to learn about these things to provide the services.
I'm going to give you guys 30 seconds each. I'll start with you, Onyedikachi, since you are the one on screen right now. What are the 3 things we must learn to help us? My hashtag is I deal with her. And her, in this instance, is any girl, child, or woman who faces any form of abuse. How would you personally deal with her?
I think firstly, it's me being conscious of my own role in the system. I think that a lot of men, when you hear this men are scum, they panic and say, oh, not me. It's what's my own role? Interrogating my male privileges to say, what's my own role in maintaining the system of violence against women, and being cautious and holding myself accountable. That's the first way I can show that I deal with her. The second way is to call it out when I see it happening, and it's in the small things. It's like men screaming at women when women are driving, saying, I'm sure that's a woman driving and making all the snide comments, and being violent verbally against women. It's calling that out too. It's in calling out, intimate partner violence when I see it happening. My friend talking about how he just beats his wife or slapped his wife, calling that out and holding them accountable. That's one way that I can show that I deal with her. And finally, with the women in my life, I'm providing a safe space where they can talk about the violence that they experience. Because 1 in 4 women will experience sexual violence. 1 in 4. I have 3 sisters. If I had one more, at least one of my sisters would have experienced sexual violence. So creating a conducive environment where they can come to me and talk about this thing so that I can help them get help is one way that I can also show that I deal with her personally.
Thank you, Onyedikachi. And then to Blessing, who's also a mother of a girl. How would you deal with her personally?
Okay, first of all, the name of my nonprofit is Kinsukuro Foundation, and Kinsukuro is a Japanese word that means the piece is more beautiful for having been broken. So, and we go about this by empathizing, educating, and empowering people. So first of all, it's to make them understand that you empathize with the girl and say, I understand where you're coming from. I've been there. I feel your pain. And even though I haven't, I sympathize with you. The second thing is to educate. Okay, you've been through this. This happened because this, maybe for this kind of reasons, or maybe sometimes not through any fault of yours. But then this is what you need to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. This is how you can cope with yourself and not feel like a victim. And this is how you can cope with yourself and not feel that it's over for you and not feel the stigma. And then the next thing is to empower. So what's next? What do you want to do with your life? Go for it. You can achieve anything you set your mind to do. And however way we can help you, you can always depend on us to help you. Empowerment.
Thank you very much to Blessing, all the way from Maryland, and to Onyedikachi, all the way from Kansas, for spending the last 55 minutes or so with us. I appreciate it. And we have scrolled across the screen how to reach you. The Postpartum Network of Africa helps women to help their mental health when they're having kids, while Blessing Douglas in D_K Foundation seeks to raise awareness to help women also know that even if they've been victims, they can survive. And I wish you all the best, especially with the book of Love and Bruises. We may love our child, we may love our children, but we really do not have the right to bruise them. On that note, I'd say thank you for watching and see you again when we continue today with her. Thank you, Blessing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Onyedikachi.
Thank you very much for having me.
I pledge to always talk to my parents and other trusted adults about anything that makes me feel sad, angry, afraid, or worried. I pledge to say no if someone asks to see or touch my private parts. I pledge to respect and care for other children as I like to be respected and cared for. I pledge to report, speak out, and get help from my parents or a trusted adult when anyone hurts me. So help me God.